welcome to Woman Vision TV. It's where women talk. I'm Nadia Giordana. My guest today is Debbra Anne. She's here to talk about how to handle difficult coworkers. This should be interesting. Let's go talk to Debbra. Deb, welcome. I'm glad you could make it today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
You know, I have to imagine that almost anyone watching today has had experiences with difficult coworkers and probably not known how to handle every situation. What was it that prompted you to write about the subject?
Yeah, well, I started a class, and it was a writing class. And little did I know they wanted you to write a book as we were going along.
A whole book.
A whole book, yes. So, you know, at that time I hadn't had anything in mind about what to write. So I decided to write about something that was hard for me at the time, a difficult thing that was going on in my life. And it ended up being about difficult coworkers. We had a person that was out on medical leave, and it sort of snowballed into some situations that made it difficult at work. So I really started writing as sort of a healing process almost to kind of get out that anger. There's a lot of anger that came out in the beginning.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah. And as I began to write, I realized, you know, going from a different perspective, that, you know, I could really learn from this whole situation. And so I feel like I've grown from writing this book.
Well, what are some examples of the types of behavior that either you experienced or other people? You've probably been given a lot of examples from other people. Give us some examples of the kind of things that difficult people do in the workplace.
Yeah. Well, I think, for one thing, a lot of people like their job. It's not necessarily the work that they do, it's the people, or it's not, maybe not even the people, but it's the behaviors that come about at certain times. And the behaviors that I talk about in my book are not necessarily behaviors that are going to land you in human resources all the time.
Right.
You know, they're not illegal or anything like that.
They're
but
more subtle, aren't they?
They're more subtle. They're maybe even borderline soft forms of bullying. But what happens is you as a person, you might not want to come to work. You might not want to do as good a job as you can do. So the things I talk about are things like gossiping.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yes, interrupting. People that are know-it-alls that, you know, just don't let you, you know, get a word in edgewise. Procrastination. Another really hot button that I didn't realize, but when I started writing this book, is email etiquette. And Dr. Susan Strauss, she mentions...
I know her.
I interviewed her for the book. And she mentions that when she does her consulting, harassment and bullying consulting, that email is one of the hottest buttons that people have.
How do they use email in that manner?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example, okay? So, I work with a guy that every time he writes an email, it's... Number one, it's a run-on sentence. It's all caps.
Oh, yeah.
It's, you feel like you're the worst person and the dumbest person in the world because you didn't get something right. But the funny thing is, when you go talk to him, he is not like that at all. I mean, he is a nice, kind person. So sometimes I think in our emails, stuff comes through that really people don't intend.
Yeah,
I
do believe that's true. Yeah.
You can't tell a tone necessarily from an email. And sarcasm doesn't always come through, you know, correctly.
And if you're in a hurry, because I've been accused on occasion, not very often, of being curt in an email, and I can only assume that I was busy at the time. I stuck to the point. I usually don't do a lot of extra words. And in the end, instead of saving time, I came off seeming curt, and that wasn't my intent.
Well, on the flip side of that, sometimes people are way over friendly. You might have somebody that is LOL all the time and smiley faces, and sometimes they use swear words because they feel like they're comfortable using that sort of language with you. But what people don't realize is in a business setting, that's not really appropriate.
No. No, that really wouldn't be. I can see that.
Yes.
I have to think that a difficult person in the workplace doesn't always see themselves that way. Like the man that you mentioned, he may not even realize that he's affecting people. What are some of the things that we can, as people in the workplace, ask ourselves to determine whether or not we're playing fair with our coworkers?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I want to convey in this book is a lot of these things have to do with ourselves inside, like how we process it and how we think about it. You know, I talk about myself gossiping, and you know, if I really have made a rule that, you know, if I can't say something kind and true and isn't necessary, then don't say it. And I think there's some things like that that you can start to think about it, you know, and really make some rules for yourself. And
how would I feel if someone were saying that about, it's just to stop and think for a moment, isn't it?
Right, it absolutely is. You know, I talk about gossiping, and one of the things in the book, you know, we go trying to figure out, why does gossiping bother me, but maybe not somebody else. And one example that I show in the book, or I tell in the book, is about how a friend and I were talking about gossiping, and she's like, well, okay, what is the reason why you don't like gossiping? And I said, well, it's unkind, it's unnecessary, it takes up time. And she's like, yeah, so what? And she goes, dig deeper. And so when I really got to the bottom, I realized that one of the reasons why I don't like gossiping is because of the fact that those people end up spending a lot of time doing it, and they stay late because they didn't get their work done.
Oh,
and
okay.
When I thought in my mind that the boss would think they're a better employee because they stayed late. She didn't, not knowing the fact that they spent time doing something they shouldn't have been doing. So what I'm trying to get people to do is to drill down and really figure out their hot points and why they occur, and to kind of start thinking about that in your mind and reconnecting the points. Okay, if I know that my ego has issues with that, okay, stop connecting it that way. And the funny thing is, I don't know why I did that, because when you look at the numbers of work, jobs and stuff that I do, it's double lots of times from other people. So why do I have problems with that? So it's funny little things like that our mind connects things with.
So we really do have to ask ourselves some of those questions in order to figure out what it really means and how it really works out for us.
Another one that I talk about is quitting and staying, a quitter and a stayer. So it's a person that has decided to quit their job, but they didn't leave it. They're still there. And one of the things I ask people to look at is, the funny thing is people will stay because their doctor or their daycare is close by.
Yeah.
Or one girl that I interviewed, she said, the reason I stay is because I have gray hair and I'm overweight and I don't think I can get a job. It's funny the things that we tell ourselves to, we could move on to a better job that we would be happier at.
Afraid to let go.
We're afraid to let go. So, I ask people to look at their passions and really try to figure out what that is and to go after it. Don't just say I'm too old or I'm too whatever. Find it. Do some soul searching and find it.
Are there any statistics or stories that you have that might address the subject of the difficult coworkers you're talking about?
Yeah, I have one that I think is important. There are about 700 people in the United States that die every year because of workplace violence. And you might think, that's not a huge number compared to the murders and stuff that occur. But, I grew up in a town of 700 people. It was a very small town. And if I think of that as each year my town is wiped out, to me that's a big number. And that's not even really including people that commit suicide because of depression, because of bullying and
Being bullied in the workplace. So difficult coworkers can go way beyond just being difficult. You can have the bullying, violence. I hadn't even really thought about. I mean, I know it exists, but I hadn't thought about it in that context. But is there some? Well, there's certainly benefit, but is there a way of, I'm assuming that nipping it in the bud, shall we say, where you've got a difficult coworkers making trouble for other people so that it doesn't progress to the level of bullying and, God forbid, violence?
Yeah, I think as coworkers, I'm asking people to be more conscious of their behavior. And, if you see somebody else being bullied or there's, behavior that you don't think is, that they should be doing, talk to them about it.
I can speak up about it.
Speak up about it. It's kind of like the school violences that we see these days. Speak up about it. You never know what kind of situation people are in. They may have some really traumatic home experiences that they bring to work, and you don't know where that trigger is.
Yeah.
So getting human resources involved, hopefully that's the last resort, but that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
That's their job. So
gender issues, does that play out differently between the genders? The same gender, male to female, female to female. Are there big differences, or is it pretty much similar?
Well, I think, with the certain topics that I talk about, you might have women that do more gossiping, but then you might have men, on the other hand, that are engaged in looking at things on the internet that they shouldn't be, or they might be the people that swear, So, yeah, I mean, there are certain things that certain genders
do it in different ways.
In different ways.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, now, do you have a website, or we'll put that on the screen? You don't have to read it off to me, but you will have a website, or you do have a website, and your book is. Well, tell us the title of the book.
The title is called "Don't Quit Yet," and it's how to handle coworker friction with tenacity, humor, and grace.
Oh, I like your title, because that's exactly what we need to do, isn't it?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, how about some final words of wisdom before we close?
Just, I guess, as a coworker, be conscious of your actions, be conscious of what you say to people, be conscious of what you write to people, and know that this is a business that setting that you're in and we're talking about. If you want to talk to your friends in a different way, that's okay. But in a business setting, be respectful and try to get along. I know that not everybody has the same point of view. That's human nature, right?
Yeah.
But, just trying to be respectful.
Oh, I have one quick question. This is an election year, and I have to believe that in the workplace, it certainly is not appropriate to talk about religion or politics. Are there any good ways of shutting a person down or skirting that question or topic if it's brought up in conversation?
I'll give you an example of something maybe that's a little bit less off point, but you know, being Wisconsin and Minnesota, we have football rivals.
Same premise.
Right, same
Sure.
premise.
Yeah.
And, you know, it gets to the point where you probably should just leave that out of the conversations because it ends up just causing too many problems. And you know, like the same thing with politics and stuff. People can talk about that until they're blue in the face,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's best to leave stuff
Best
like
to
that.
leave that alone. Everyone
Yeah.
wants the last word.
Yep.
Oh, I've got to go get a cup of coffee.
Exactly. Just
Exit.
exit and just
Exit.
say, you know, yeah, that's a conversation for another time.
I think that's the best advice. Deb, thank you for
Thank you.
coming on the show today.
Yes, thank you for having
It
me.
was great to have you here.
Thank you.